Yesterday I had the blessing to be able to baptize one of my nephews, my 32nd nephew. And we had a small mass for the family, and I had to run back after the mass, and my brother was going out to do the meal for the family, and I told him I had a busy day, so he gave me one of those energy drinks. I was like, here, you'll need this. And so I drank that, and on the way back, and before mass, I started to read the first reading and look up the clouds, and I think I saw something. I was like, oh, this is bad. It was just a reminder of why I don't do those things anymore. Don't drink those things. But anyway, I don't know why I said that. We're at the end of the year, at the end of the church's year, right? This is the last Sunday of the year, and last weekend we were talking about the end times. What would happen at the end times? And today, the church places the solemnity of Jesus Christ, the King of the universe, not by mistake, at the end of the church's year. Because it's a powerful reminder for all of us that indeed Jesus Christ is the King of the universe, the King of our lives, the King of our church. And it is to Him that we need to focus ourselves, our hearts and our minds, solely on Him. Because one day He will come with great power and glory. And so I think it's important to ask ourselves, well, what does this even mean? What is this kingship of Jesus? And what does that have to do with us? Why should we even worry about it? The first reading from the prophet Daniel was talking about the Son of Man receiving dominion, glory, and kingship, that all people would serve Him, and that His dominion would have no end, and that His kingdom will never be destroyed. If you remember in the Old Testament, that was the same promise that God made to David. When David did something for the Lord, and David's heart was moved with pity and for the Lord, and God was pleased with that. And so God promised him that there was going to be a kingship for eternity in his lineage. And so when Jesus comes into our world, He fulfills that kingship and that promise. A lot of people in the first century, a lot of Jews especially, they were thinking that the Messiah had a political mission. A political mission that He was going to liberate the people from the oppression of the Romans. That they were going to be free politically speaking. And Jesus came to do a lot more than we were asking of Him. We were only asking deliverance from political and world oppression. And Jesus came to offer us spiritual liberation and open up the doors of heaven so that we could come and rest with Him and be back again with the Father. So Jesus' kingdom was not of this world, as He told Pilate today. Jesus is not really worried about what's happening. Well, He's worried about what's happening in the world, but His end purpose is not the world. His end purpose is eternity. And He came to teach us and to show us the love of the Father so that we could open up our hearts and we could receive that eagerness and that thirst and that hunger of the Father to gather us together in heaven. And so we celebrate this kingship of Jesus today. This King who offers us a lot more than we could ever ask for. This Jesus whose kingdom is not to overrule our freedom. It's not to make us do whatever He wants. This kingship is a kingship of love, of mercy, of compassion, of being hoping and that we open our hearts to Him so that He can gather us around, so that He can fill us with that love and compassion of the Father. This kingship of Jesus who is in heaven is reigning from heaven. This kingship of Jesus that to the eyes of the world, it doesn't make any sense. Look at a cross. Who would ever imagine that the King of the world would die on a cross? This was foolish to the people who had their hearts and minds placed in this world alone. No wonder why after the crucifixion a lot of Jews walked away, sad because their king had died. And so Jesus came to show us that this world doesn't really matter. What matters here is our eternal dwelling, our eternal home with Him. So Jesus, the King of the universe, came to be humiliated, came to be punished, came to be mocked for our sake. That is how much the Father loves us. That is a crazy, infinite love that the Father has for us, that is willing to put Himself out there, to be humiliated and mocked, so that you and I can be saved. This is what the kingship of Jesus is all about. Always placing the other before Himself. Always being willing to empty Himself for our sake, so that we can be saved, so that we can be at peace. And so Jesus came to tell us that the end is not this world, but this world is the means through which we get to our end, which is eternity. So this concept of Jesus' kingdom and kingship, I think is powerful and it's very significant, but if we just don't embrace it, if we just don't see Jesus as our King, we're just wasting His sacrifice and His love for us. If we're not willing to open our hearts and embrace it and make it our own, make Jesus our King, so that He can fill us, so that He can be with us, then we're just wasting His suffering and His love for us. I think that as a society, as individuals, we run the risk of taking Pilate's attitude. If you remember, in his conversation, Pilate was asking Jesus, "Are you a king?" And Jesus is asking back, "Are you saying this because you believe it? Is this coming from you? Or are you saying this because someone else told you?" And obviously we know that Pilate was saying that because someone else said it. He didn't really believe it. That's why it was very easy for him to wash his hands, walked away, and send Jesus to the crucifixion. Because he didn't really care. He didn't really believe in the kingship of Jesus. And so we as well run that risk of walking away from the Lord, of simply washing our hands away and not make His suffering our own. I think that as a society we're moving that way. Look at our culture. There's tons of people that don't care about Christianity, don't care about Jesus, don't care about death or what the eternal life will bring. A lot of us are only investing in this world. And so if that's the case, if we only embrace this world, if we don't have our hearts and our minds in eternity with God Himself, making Jesus our King, then let us not be surprised that when at the end of our day, when we come to see God face to face, He says, "Who are you? Do I know you? Go take the place where you invested your earthly pilgrimage in." Let us hope that that's not the case with us. Let us really try to make Jesus our King, part of who we are, of every single aspect of our lives, our public lives, our private lives, that we can actually have our mind and our hearts with Him, so that He can reign within us, so that He can really satisfy us and fulfill us with His love. Our King is here and now. He wants us to accept Him as our King and Lord, but He doesn't impose His will on us. He doesn't force it on us. He knows better. He loves us too much to do that. We either accept Jesus as our King of our whole life, of every single hour and minute of the day, not just an hour on Sundays, but every single day. We either do that, or we simply mock Christianity. We simply mock Jesus' suffering for us. So at the end of the day, who's your King? Who are you living for? Who are you investing in? Is it truly Jesus? Or is it something else?